Well, my name is Daphne Zepos. I come from Greece, but I live in Brooklyn, and I've lived in the US since 1987. I was a chef for many years, and I slowly got, taken out of the kitchen to start a wonderful cheese service at Camden Place that was very, very successful. And then out of the kitchen, working with farmers and the California Milk Advisory Board when they were really putting together a program for farmstead cheeses. And so that's really kind of my career and how it started. And well, what else? After that, I opened the caves at Artisanal, if you want. What else? How did I get involved in cheese?
Yes. Yes.
Actually, I was on the line, I was ready for service, and my sous chef turned around and said, "Hey, you have to start taking care of the cheeses from now on." And so I looked at this, metallic pan with little bits of ugly cheese wrapped in parchment paper or wrapped in plastic, and I was like, what is this? What can I do with this? What are we going to do with this? Melt it? And he really gave me a lot of incentives, if you want, to develop my taste and to develop my knowledge. And the more I asked about cheeses, the less I figured that people knew to give me answers. And so if you want, it was because nobody knew anything that I really sort of sank my teeth into it and wanted to learn more. And so the more I learned suddenly by reading books or by meeting people who knew cheese, the more, it sort of opened up for me. When I started the cheese program at Camden Place, I knew English cheeses better, I think, than I even knew French cheeses or, at the time, American. I want to say it was 1995. I mean, I was as I told you, a young samurai cook, devoted to the line, devoted to it. And all of these flavors that were coming together in the world of cheese linked me to my past. And one of them was, having lived in England for many years as a kid or as a young adult, I had loved Lancashire. I had loved good cloth-bound cheddar. Being Greek, I loved feta and all those really rustic little sheep and goat's milk cheeses that come from the island I come from. So I reverted back to that. And so enters into my world, the folks from Neal's Yard. And at the time it was David Lockwood and Dominic Coit. And of course, soon thereafter, the fabulous Deborah Dickerson. But they were the two men that I went to see at the pasta shop in Oakland. So I actually took the day off from Camden Place, where I was a chef, and took the Muni all the way took Bart all the way to Oakland to meet with them. And they opened a world to me. And they are the ones, I think, that first talked about the American Cheese Society. It was 1995, I want to say, when I started getting involved really with cheeses and developing a good cheese selection at Camden Place. Although nothing yet in the form of a cart or anything. This was well before that. And I don't know, there wasn't the web at the time, so how did I find out? I can't remember how I found out that in the summer of 1996, the American Cheese Society was organizing a trip to Greece, to the mountains of Greece, where I had spent so much time in the past. And so I went. I met with Dan Strongen, who I think that year was the year he was also president of the ACS. And we sat outside a little restaurant and had lunch in beautiful sunny San Francisco. And here was this American fellow talking to me about, an area of Greece that I knew very well. I had done enduro biking and cross-country biking all throughout those hills and knew the shepherds up there, and sort of thought, oh my God, we're going to go there and see all of this again. And so I went. And so that trip was really a life-turning moment for me, that trip. No question about it. And I'll be forever grateful to the ACS for it. Because that's where I met Ari Weinsweig and Randolph Hodgson of Neal's Yard Dairy, Paula Lambert, Alison Hooper, and Bob. They were there with their spouses, Ricky Carroll, George Henline with his wife, Mariano, who at the time was making cheddar at Shelburne. I was in heaven. All these people were so interesting and so knowledgeable and so open, and we went to see shepherds make cheese in the most primitive ways up in the hills of my country, and they were just, it was great.
Very nice.
So I was hooked. From that moment on, my life revolved around the American Cheese Society, the American cheeses. I was just completely, after that I was completely hooked. And so I was very lucky in that I had a chef who ruled the kitchen in a very, very nice way. And when I asked for sabbaticals to go and work at Neal's Yard Dairy, to go and visit cheesemakers in France, would give me time off and said, I'm going to keep your position in the kitchen. That's what he did for everybody. But I mean, for me, it was vital. So I think that I went to the first ACS just after that trip, and it was an ACS at the CIA up in upstate New York. And that is where I met Deborah Dickerson. That's where I met Max McCallman, and a slew of other people. And that is also where I made the connection, I think, with Cindy and David Major, and then we went to Comté and to Etiva, which was on the Swiss side. Yes, I think that was it. That was the first time. I loved every cheesemaker. I had conversations with Judy Shad that were exquisite. Gerd Stern, at the time, he was a major influence. He was bohemian and he was a hipster, and I found a lot in him that I recognized in my friends around me. And he was very artistic and he was a free spirit. And he's the one who hooked me into the competition. He took me over to judge, and I think I judged 2 years after I was given the option to chair it. So I inherited it from Russ McCall. Russ McCall, who had been a competition chair for, I think, for 2 years. And so the first time I took over, I think, totally, was in Vermont. Not this time, but the first time in Vermont. It was a huge job even then, and we weren't that organized. I think we had 350 cheeses, and Russ McCall and his wife and maybe one person or two more people were helping when the cheeses arrived to categorize them. I mean, we were nothing, and it was only a day long at the time, and it was only on Thursday, and it was during my tenure that we made it a day and a half, and we started on Wednesday because it became far too long. But it went from 360 cheeses to 600 and something cheeses in those 3 years that I had it. And the tenure is 2 years, and there was nobody to replace me, so I kept it for an extra year, which really, it had become too big for my mind, which is devoid of logistics of that type. But what I'm really proud of doing for the competition at the time, I was a board member also throughout those years. We were a very small group of people, and at the time we were all, how can I call us, pioneers in it. We felt like trappers. That's how I felt, like the trappers that slowly learn about the American continent and slowly open ways for other people to follow. That's how it felt like at the time. And so what I did with the competition, and that I'm really sort of very proud about, was I really brought the press in. It was the first time, I think, where I was very actively targeting aesthetic judges that would then write about it and make this competition known. And so Tina Ulaiki was one of the people that I brought in, Harold McGee, Ed Bear from The Art of Eating. You know, I was editors from Fine Cooking also came over, and Bon Appetit. There was the editor from Bon Appetit also came a year. And yes, I really was trying very hard to get people that were then going to talk about it. You know. It was just the moment. We were just slightly ahead of the curve. It was a curve that was happening. You know, there was a tipping point that happened while all of this, you know, was taking place. It's just exploded in front of our faces. I think the interest in cheeses suddenly became something very palpable in the world of fine dining, of gourmets, of gourmands everywhere. People wanted to know what their cheeses were and what they could have, you know, in a restaurant. And of course, the cheeses that people react to in a very sort of immediate way are cheeses from their own country, from their own neck of the woods, even better, you know. And so I think that's what happened. And the ACS, yeah, really sort of opened those doors, definitely. Or took advantage of this enthusiasm and funneled it down to the cheesemakers who reacted, you know. Favorite memory, well, as I told you, that trip to Metzovo was one that really changed a lot about me, changed my career basically. And I was a very happy chef. I didn't plan to move away from the kitchen, from the back of the house. And so this was something that just washed over me and opened such a universe to me, and it still is one that I thrive in. And I consider myself, as I'm sure you do, very, very lucky to have found something that I'm so passionate about, you know. So, and also one in which I'm still opening up the ground, you know, where I'm still inventing the position I'm going to be working on, giving it a name, and then, you know, I'm sort of the first person who does it, and then there's other people behind me defining it even more, but I'm sort of making it as I go along, which is really, you know, what a gift, what a wonderful gift. So that, which is a sort of a daily memory, a daily reminder. The other is that I really learned how to taste. So being a judge, not only chairing the competition, that also made me an international judge. So I judged all over Europe because of it. I judged the American, how do we call it, the one that John Umhafer has, the Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association, the international one that they do every other year. I judged that maybe 2 or 3 times. And so the more I judged, the more that whole world of flavors sort of emerged. And I think that is also a gift that was given to me, you know, to be able to develop a palate that was really very astute. And I think that you can start with the dullest of palates. I don't think that you're born with a palate. I think it's like a muscle that you flex, and the more you use it, the more flavors you get. The more it links all these wonderful parts of your body and memory and experience, and it brings all of that forth, you know? And for me, it happened through cheese. It didn't happen through wine or anything else. It happened through cheese, that this world was open to me. We were very much in the forefront of things, and I think when I first started thinking of protecting everything that has to do with raw milk, cheeses and raw, you know, so when we put together the Cheese of Choice Coalition. That was an incredibly important moment in our lives. And it was Deborah Dickerson and myself who wanted to protect the right of the American cheesemaker to do as he wished and to at least be able to make raw milk cheeses. It was a conversation that we had, the two of us, and we became more and more pissed off about it as we talked. And so we were, okay, we have to do something about it. And at the time, we were all on the board. We were board members, both of us. And Ruth Flory was president. So we went straight to the president of the ACS and we said, look it, what are we going to do about this? And then the next people that I involved at the time was Old Ways Preservation, right? And they were incredible. Dunn Gifford, who was a politician of food, a word monger, invited me on a trip, an Old Ways trip, and we sat down. And I said, this is really something that I want to do, and I don't know how to do it on my own. You really have to give us, the words, give us the political traction to find the people that are important and that are strong and that are powerful that will help us. And we were actually sitting having a drink with Deborah Madison also, the three of us. And, he took a napkin, as everybody does, seems like, and wrote down, the pan-Atlantic concern for the preservation of raw milk cheeses. And he said pan-Atlantic because it was on both sides of the Atlantic. And that's how it started. I mean, I still have this napkin, And of course, it was a tremendous job. Kathy Strange got involved, and the Cheese Importers of America, and Nancy Radke of Parmigiano Reggiano, heavy artillery set in and took the subject at hand from us small revolutionaries and sort of, put heft behind it. And look at what happened. Look at what we managed to do. And at the time, it was just Deborah Dickerson and myself sort of getting in touch with all those little cheese shops saying we need signatures. It was really kind of amazing. It was a very difficult thing to do because it was bigger than us, So how, it took minds that were bigger than ours, more powerful than ours, more corporate than ours. But we were the ones that really just by sitting, I guess, in Deborah's car and getting really pissed off and really that all of this happened, At least that's how I remember it.
Wow.
And I think that's it. I think more than anything, it's the people that the American Cheese Society gathers. When you have this idea that the world is homogeneous, when it isn't. You have so many incredible characters that become incredible cheesemakers and cheesemongers, and the conversations that we had at the competition at the time and as board members, but more during the conference in general, were just fantastic. It was, for me, I'm not even an American. For me, it was like a cross-section of all American society. You had from the most sophisticated PhD back to Lander to a man who could hardly string 4 words together because he'd been on a farm for 6 generations. It was just, it opened this universe to me that was varied and ever-growing, alive. I think that was the best part. Still is the best part.
Excellent.
Okay, we're done.
Well, thank you. My gosh.